It's been an amazing year for BBC One. Early this year, it had the highest audience share that it's reached for a decade. Bake Off has been getting viewing figures in the week that are worthy of Saturday night. And of course, there is the Sunday night phenomenon that is Poddart, which hopefully you were enjoying the pictures we were showing earlier. But there have been some problems, and hopefully we'll get round to talking about the Saturday night entertainment issue, taken a bit of a tumble since Charlotte was here last year and talked about how marvellous that particular programme was going to be. Also, The Voice, obviously, has been in the news recently and seems to have had as many judges as its winners has had hits so far. So we're talking about that, but importantly, obviously, is to talk about the coming year and what Charlotte wants to do to sort of underline what her channel is going to be about. She's been doing the job for 2 years now.
Yep.
And what's coming up. And hopefully we'll see some great clips of shows later. Just in terms of housekeeping, can I just say, because it's only 45 minutes, because there's a brilliant networking opportunity at the end with Charlotte and some of her sort of individual controllers, we're not having questions from the floor, but please, please use your app to send in questions that I can then ask at the end. I can sort of read them all at the end. I did want to start off, I know that myself and Charlotte listened to John Whittingdale earlier in the day. This is obviously a crucial year. Was it a relief when he said it wasn't his job to tell you what to do with BBC, and also that Strictly was absolutely appropriate for BBC One?
Well, I think it was very assuring to hear John Whittingdale say how great he thought BBC's programmes were and how important he felt the BBC was. So I think, yeah, there was lots that he said that was very reassuring.
There has been, though, he's talked about sort of distinctive programming, innovative programming, and was a bit critical about The Voice and how, you know, the sort of money being paid. Do you feel that political pressure? Is that going to sort of dictate how...
I really think if you look at the last year, you know, I think we've had the highest share since 2008. When I think about sitting here, well, not exactly in this room, but sitting here a year ago, you know, I think since then we've absolutely enhanced the channel's position as the nation's favourite channel. And I think that absolutely has been because of the, you know, unparalleled range of extraordinary programmes that I think have been distinctive. I think we've had innovation, you know, across all corners of the schedule. I think we've had, you know, some extraordinary hit programmes which have, you know, really been sparked the national conversation, whether it's Bake Off, whether it is, as you say, Poldart, whether it's EastEnders Live, whether it's taking risks with shows like Baby P, with The Missing, with our new science. You know, we've put art, science, history right in the centre of, you know, the centre of our primetime schedule. And I think, you know, I would say we've taken risks, we've been distinctive, and I think the fantastic thing is when we've taken those risks, the audience has really responded. So I suppose, you know, I look at the last year and think, you know, our mission now is not to be complacent, but is to think, how are we going to push that for the next year? How are we going to keep making sure that we deliver those really distinctive programmes, that we're really pioneering, that we really, you know, encourage talent and all these great suppliers in this room to come back to us with, you know, huge creative ambition to make sure that we continue to be that distinctive.
Where are the areas there? I mean, drama is obviously, it's very long running, you have got extra money. Is that going to soak up a lot of the sort of ambitions you have, or are there specific areas that you really want to focus on that you think, you know, come to me with ideas, that's what I want to do? Look,
BBC One is a big, broad, mixed genre channel, and I think that's the fantastic thing about BBC One, is that it's as much about entertainment as it's about comedy, as it is about drama, as it is about factual. You know, all of those pieces, in my view, play an enormous part and role, and it's what makes BBC One so distinctive. It is that big, broad, popular, mixed genre channel. I think it's what our audience really appreciate about what we do. We're the home of British talent, so it's absolutely that place where British talent want to be, you know, and I think it's a tribute to all the talent that make programmes for us, that the channel's done so well in the last year. So I don't really look at it as to which area. I think all of those, I continually look at how we're going to lead the way in every single genre.
Do you feel stung, though, by some of the sort of not quite so successful formulas? So obviously Tumble, I've mentioned, Prized Apart, their sort of attempt to do Saturday night entertainment. Does that make you less sort of more risk averse?
No, absolutely not. I think the great thing is if you work on BBC One, I have an absolute remit to take risks. And I think, you know, you don't take risks without knowing that some things won't work. You know, the way I work with talent and the way I work with the production companies, I think anyone who's worked with me knows that, you know, we're in it together. We go out at something with, you know, the absolute ambition to do something different, to do something which we think leads the way. Sometimes, you know, we don't get the audience we'd have wished for. So I think if you think about Tumble, if you think about Prize to Part, these were really bold, ambitious projects. I think they were superbly produced. I'm really proud of what we achieved. They didn't reach the audience that we wanted to, but that's part of risk-taking. But I hope it doesn't make anybody feel that we're not going to take those risks.
And not even the sort of daily onslaught of Daily Mail headlines about each programme that goes wrong, what sort of things you're doing. How do you...
I really don't worry about that. I work with some of the best people in the business. You know, my commissioning teams that I work with, my own BBC One channel team, you know, they're fantastic support. We all absolutely focus on the audience. We focus on what we think will appeal to a big, broad audience. That's our remit. I would say that, you know, we're here to entertain, we're here to educate and to inform. And I think I really try and drive that mission through everything that we do. You know, everything that we do on BBC One has to have that sense of purpose.
Let's kick off then with a clip. Tell us why you think that's defining of the channel.
I love Car Share. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I think, you know, it's great British talent at its very, you know, at the top of its game, with, you know, both being pioneering as well as producing an extraordinary, much-loved show that was a hit overnight. You know, I think I love the simplicity of the whole concept. You know, I mean, I have to be honest, when we read the script, I absolutely loved it, but, you know, Shane Allen and I did kind of go, gosh, this is a, you know, primetime sitcom, and we're going to be in the confines of a car for the full series, and that felt, you know, that felt risky. But, you know, Peter Kay is an absolutely brilliant talent. I think the relationship between John and Kaylee in that, you know, beautifully performed by Peter and Sian, it's infectious. I mean, I've seen that clip, I've seen the whole series actually so many times, and it still makes you want to giggle, doesn't it? In fact, it has that brilliant thing that I think comedy does that, you know, I'm not sure anything else does, that the more you watch it, the more you love it. And I think, you know, that warmth, I think that sense of it's joyful. It's, you know, I love the third character in the film, which is the Forever FM music. You know, it's got the detail, but it's brilliant, isn't it? It's about a commute to work. It's something we can all relate to. And I love that these conversations spiral in the car and we get into dream sequences. You know, it's brilliant, innovative. That's exactly what I look for.
Is the sort of ambition that it will maybe replace Miranda in the schedule?
Oh, I don't think you replace comedy icons. You'd never do that. Miranda's absolutely fantastic, but you know, I think Peter Kay's you know, been an extraordinary success, and you know, I think it's brilliant.
And it's coming back on, isn't it?
I really hope so. I really hope so.
But nothing to commit to yet.
Can't confirm yet, but I really hope so.
Speaking of Miranda and obviously last year's commitments, before I want to talk more about Car Share, but what's happening with the Generation Game? So it's already been a pilot.
So we piloted before Christmas. We had a really great fun time making it, and Miranda really enjoyed it. Miranda at the moment wants to focus on acting and writing, so you know, the show's very much got Miranda at the heart of the idea. It's absolutely something that, you know, we want to do with her. So the time has got to be right for Miranda.
She doesn't want to do it then?
No, we're absolutely still in discussion about it. As I say, that's her focus. But for the moment, you know, we've got to wait for the right...
If any of us were to put money on Generation Game with Miranda coming on BBC One...
I'm not a betting kind of girl. I'm not going to give you that. If I bet on BBC One,
money on it,
I would. Honestly, Miranda and I are constantly in discussion. And I think, you know, she wants to write, she wants to do her acting at the moment. It's very much on hold.
Do you regret the comments you made just before the festival last year? In The Guardian, though, you should never regret that, obviously.
What did I say?
Well, that it was coming back and that she was going to do it. Which
well, we were piloting it.
Okay.
But you know, and she enjoyed it. We all enjoyed it. I think there was lots about the pilot we really loved. Okay. So watch this space.
Tell us about how these comedy ideas are going to come up, because the interesting thing about Car Share, obviously, is it was showed on iPlayer first. With BBC Three going online, there's sort of a little slot for it, but where are you going to get those sorts of comedy ideas from? Where are you going to be putting them out first?
I mean, Peter Kay's car share was very much an experiment that we did for the weekend just before it launched on the channel, so it was very much a BBC One commission. But Peter was very keen that, you know, he loves the idea of binging on a series, and there's certainly a big part of our audience, or a part of our audience, that does love that. But it didn't stop people coming back and wanting to watch it weekly, so I think it was really interesting. We already, you know, we play comedy at 10:35, some comedy comes over from the other channels, so Count Arthur Strong now plays on BBC One, BBC Three, there's always been a strong relationship there. So I think, you know, we do Comedy Playhouse is another thing that Shane Allen and I have introduced as a way of allowing both established and new talent to experiment. But, you know, with the number of hours and with the range of talent that, you know, we are able to work with, there's creative headroom on BBC One to find those next shows. And, you know,
will you use more sort of YouTube, you know, vlogging ideas, sort of not just BBC Three, but all sorts of.
Well, I think what BBC
talent.
Three are doing with their comedy shorts, and there will be, you know, there'll be all sorts of ways that different talent, you know, make their way up to want to be on BBC One. But again, that's very much about the right idea, and you know, my focus has to be on finding the right shows for a big, broad BBC One audience.
Okay, with new faces, no, not just. I mean, one of the things about Peter Kay, yeah. Obviously, he was a Channel 4 name. He's come across with Shane. It's worked brilliantly, but. Are you looking for new faces?
Absolutely. We've got, you know, Mountain Goats is going out at the moment. We've got the Kennedys coming up. We had Kayvan Novak's show recently. You know, it's the range that we do across the piece, but absolutely. And in Comedy Playhouse, I think it's a really, really nice place for you know, to try and experiment and do people's passion projects. Okay.
Can we talk about documentaries and non-scripted? Because I think probably lots of people in the audience are quite keen. Particularly
quite
given
keen
your background. Yeah, I'm quite keen to sort of think about ideas and what you're looking for. What sort of areas, how are you going to sort of make your mark? Because it's been one of the areas that's sort of struggling a bit more on BBC One.
I totally disagree. I think if you look at in 2015 already, we've got 9 out of 10 of the top factual shows across all the channels of BBC One shows, and half of those
I was thinking, if you think
are new
that channel-defining stuff, though, and all the most popular programmes is not documentaries, unlike Channel 4 with all its educating series.
I think the mix of what we do, I think, as I said, we've put science, we've put arts, we've put history right at prime time. Only today I'm announcing Xander Armstrong's Invisible Cities, which came out of the really successful Invisible Rome that he did with Michael Scott. That's going to be a new series at the heart of BBC One. We've got Tomorrow's Food, which is a future-facing, looking at the science of food and how 3D food is going to hit our supermarkets soon. We've got Hugh Whittingdale doing a piece about the illicit wildlife trade. So I think there's absolutely, you know, I think they are channel defining. I think Baby P, which I was incredibly proud of, putting right at, again, you know, at the heart of the schedule, a 90-minute film. The Met, I think the Met, which grew episode on episode and became a real hit for us, and I think was absolutely channel defining. I think some of what I feel about the Met actually probably does define what I think I'm really looking for, and that is borrowing some of the clothes of drama that, you know, the Met really took you right to the moment. You were on the shoulders of what it's like to be a policeman in a very complex capital city. You know, just when they get the phone call, just when the radio comes in to send them to an incident, they don't know if there's going to be a knifing, they don't know if they're going to a mental health incident, they don't, you know, and I think living that real life drama played out, you know, in a really visceral, raw way, I think is what I think our audience really were absolutely fascinated in. It was a kind of, you know, it was very authentic, it was very real, it was very unproduced, you know, extremely difficult series to shoot. It took 2 years in the making. It was very complex, you know, and really tough for the filmmakers that made it. And I think that sense of drama, which I think we're going to see a clip later of Alistair Fothergill's new series, The Hunt. I think you can carry that through to natural history, where with new technology, we'll probably talk about it later, but just, you know, we're right with the hunter as, you know, in that fight for survival as they go after the hunted. And I think, you know, again, I think our natural history is channel defining. And I've been incredibly proud to bring science to 9 o'clock as well. You know, The Truth About has been a real hit for us, dealing with issues that really matter to our audience. And I think, you know, those big, broad subjects and how you bring them to that audience and you know, perhaps I don't think a BBC One audience comes to be informed in the first place. I think that you need to think about how you get that entertaining invitation But I think, you know, they need to leave feeling that they are educated, they are informed, they are inspired.
Yeah.
I think our factual does that.
Will you do more on the Met? Because as you say, it was sort of that was the one that sort of stands out as, you know, there are loads of headlines, but it was really, you know, lots of critical acclaim. Is that going to come out? Are you going to sort of do more with various parts of the force? We've got a series about cancer that we're doing. Again, I'd say that's, you know, cancer touches all of our lives, unfortunately, but this is going to be a really inspiring, I think, emotionally charged drama telling the stories of people, and also, you know, showing that there are more people now in this country living with cancer than there are dying with cancer. We've turned a bit of a corner on that. So I think we'll absolutely be looking at other access documentaries, and where we go next, you know, is still to be discussed. Are you putting more money into documentaries and more slots? Can you give us
it's pretty much, actually, I'd say at the moment we're pretty much, you know, I think our what we put into factual is as much as it's always been. We play around, obviously, with form. I mean, I said last year that, you know, I was really keen that we brought new tones, new content, new territories, new formats, you know, and again, I feel with Eat Well for Less, I think that's landed really well for us. You know, it's, Annie Robinson's Spending Secrets, which went out last week, and next one goes out this week, you know, was a really fine example of a different sort of format that involved real people, but with Annie right out of her comfort zone as well, exploring something which again affects us all. So I think, you know, that looking for new tones and looking for new ways of talking about subject matter that I think is of universal interest is, you know, is very important to us.
Talking of universal interest, well, let's have a look at your next clip, because it's The Hunt. I think even John Whittingdale has said, you know, we should probably keep just using David Attenborough.
He's great, isn't he?
Do you sort of worry about a post-Attenborough BBC One natural history?
David's coming back to the Great Barrier Reef for us in the new year. Clearly, he's, you know, an extraordinary broadcaster and an extraordinary presenter of natural history. I think the breadth of what we do with natural history, you know, and Tom MacDonald, who's the Commissioner for Natural History, you know, is really ambitious, and we are constantly giving lots of people new chances and opening up those opportunities. You don't replace someone as great as Sir David Attenborough, but clearly we bring in lots of new talent.
Obviously, you've worked in the independent production sector, and you know those sort of big budget things, not what most people at Edinburgh are sort of focused on. What sort of advice would you give in terms of what slots there are, what sort of repeatable formats there are, and how they can be filled that aren't necessarily those?
Yeah, I mean, the slots, you know, again, we don't really commission into slots. What we do is really talk about the idea and then work out where we think would be the best place to play it, and that really is real. But I think, you know, I think both at 8 and 9 o'clock we're looking for, you know, again, it is about, I think that sense of authenticity is really important. I think people want to see real people going through experiences in front of them. I think, you know, again, I'm really keen that we find, you know, it's not about what we've done already and going, oh, right, so what she's got on screen at the moment, that's what she wants to do next. I really want people to come with new territories and new ideas, and what's the thing that's on everybody's minds in the next year. You know, that is really important, because, you know, BBC One, absolutely, it's vital that we continue to modernise, that we reflect, you know, an increasingly diverse modern Britain. So I really want those diversity of perspectives. I mean, you know, it's not as if we haven't made police shows before, but I think what the Met did was throw another light on it. You know, the complexity of crime in London was quite unique and extraordinary. So it's, again, it's not always about having to find totally new subjects. It's about giving me a different perspective on them, a different way. You know, again, I think even the technology can often lead you to that, to those kind of different perspectives and different stories. You were obviously responsible for the Bake Off format in the previous job. Yeah. Are you getting slightly bored, though, of the sort of attempts bored of Bake Off? No, not bored of Bake Off, okay. Bored of the rip-off attempts. You know, we've had every sort of talent, you know, whether it's sewing, or do you think there's much more to do? We're going to have pottery soon. Competitive formats have been, you know, part of the language of factual television for a long time, and I think, you know, from The Apprentice to MasterChef, I think, you know, it's another way of making television, and it's another way of creating narrative. I think it's really interesting. Again, we've had observational documentaries that have crossed all channels, you know, and become the programmes that have held up channels. So again, I don't think that should stop anyone's creative ambition to go, how do we do something bold and new with that? I don't honestly, I think about the idea first and then how we're going to make it, and what will be the best way of delivering that content and telling those stories Because ultimately it's about storytelling.
What skill do you have that you could be involved in some format if we do it at Edinburgh?
What skill do I? Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Oh, a skill. Oh, actually to do.
What would you like a competitive? What sort of competitive?
Kind of all right at making telly. What am I good at? Well, baking actually, I'm afraid, is my big.
Yeah,
I know it's a bit annoying, that, isn't it? But I am, as my team will tell you, I don't often bake for them, but they like it when I do. But no, I love baking. Singing, I'm into singing. Again, I'm not trying to put myself up here for, geez, why did I say that?
Edinburgh organises next
year.
Exactly.
Here we come. I can see where we're going with that. Yeah.
Actually, so where I want to go is talent.
Reading, that'd be a good one.
Yeah, that could make quite dull.
That could be really good.
Quite dull television.
Yeah. Do you want to be on one of those shows? Is that what that's about?
No, just like this. It's fine.
Okay.
Now, talent. Obviously, they often make the biggest headlines. Peter Kay coming over. How channel defining do you think are the sort of talent that you have?
Gosh, I think we have such a fantastic range of talent. I mean, I don't think we're in the days anymore of exclusivity deals, that's not, but I think talent want to be on BBC One because we reach this enormous audience, because we are the nation's favourite channel. And I think also because, I think they know that our ambition is to be pioneering and to lead the way in every genre. And I think that's very appealing to talent. I think all the talent that I work with, they know my door's always open. I'm always up for the conversation. I love the dialogue about, so where shall we go next? And I think, the ambition for BBC One is what makes talent want to work on BBC One. I find that very exciting. And
you're not concerned about people like Gabby Logan, who sort of switched from BBC Sport presenter to ITV? You think it's more likely to come the other way? Well,
I think, Gabby's been fantastic as a sports presenter for us, and I think, talent that works on BBC One want to work there because they like what we do. It doesn't mean that they can't go and do other work occasionally for other people. And, obviously, as I say, we can't do exclusivity deals, but I think talent want to be on BBC One.
Can you afford to pay as much as the others?
No, I think, we certainly don't pay as much as other broadcasters will pay for talent. That's what I think it's testimony to, the talent that they want to be on BBC One. It's not all about money for them either. I think talent want to be on the biggest channel doing their best work, and that's, it's a great thing for us.
Jeremy Clarkson lost no time in rubbing in quite how much Amazon was paying him and the team, obviously.
He's BBC Two.
No comment. Would you ever want Top Gear on BBC One?
I don't think Top Gear is it's fantastic that Chris Evans is going to be leading the new Top Gear on BBC Two, and it's going to be fantastic to see that evolve. I don't think, we don't look at shows and decide sort of and kind of go, oh, I'd fancy that. That's not how it works.
You did just that for Bake Off.
Well, I think Bake Off got to a stage where we all thought it absolutely right that it should be on BBC One, which is the, the flagship channel of the BBC. And, it's extraordinary how big it's become. I don't think any of us would have thought in this series, episode 3, getting over 10 million. And I think that showed that we have brought Bake Off to a bigger audience. And that's what, we're here to do on BBC One.
Now, tell me about talent that you have had to deal with. What happened with Tom Jones?
Tom is an absolute legend. It's been a real privilege and an honour to have Tom as, he's been an exceptional coach. I think he's been brilliant at working with new talent. And I think it's an inherent thing about The Voice, as anyone knows, The Voice across the globe. You change the presenter, you change the coach lineup. That's inherent within the format. When Rita Ora said to us that, she wasn't coming back, we made it very clear we were going to have to look at the remix of the lineup. We told Sir Tom as soon as we could, as soon as we had the new lineup. It always
just 2 days before.
I'm afraid it always comes at we always, nobody is signed up until the moment we've decided what the new lineup is, and that's a complex process. What
we're showing here is his, what he posted.
I thought it was going to be another picture. No.
What he posted. I mean, he was obviously very cross about it. This substandard behaviour from the executives is very disappointing. This is a man, as you say, he's a legend, very popular, very well known. Is that a BBC or a wall-to-wall issue? Did you get involved?
Nobody wants to upset Sir Tom. I work very closely, with all of these series. Again, Talpa, wall-to-wall, the BBC, we all work very closely at what we had to do together. It was a very difficult decision. We always make the decision about the lineup. As I say, it takes a while to get it right. It's all about the chemistry. It's all about creating the best, lineup for The Voice. The Voice has to be the leader in that. By the time we by the time we made the decision, we told Tom as soon as we could, and then we had to give, tell the press what we were doing. We had to make it public knowledge, because otherwise it would have leaked.
Was it? Did you talk to him?
I'm not going to go into the details of who said what to whom. I think that would be completely inappropriate. But we told him as soon as we could, and then the pop industry is such that it would have leaked if it hadn't gone to the press soon afterwards.
Danny Cohen, who's sitting over there, has said that there would be a place for Tom Jones on the BBC.
So Tom's coming back.
BBC One.
Do you not know that? He's that's already out there in the open. I think Danny was kind of going, God, is that out there? But it absolutely is out there. You can buy tickets if you want. He's doing the Children in Need concert for us, which is going to be fantastic with Rob Brydon.
But any more sort of, that's a one-off.
I'd love to do more with Sir Tom. He's a fantastic talent, and it's been a real privilege to work with him.
Is there a bigger issue with The Voice? I mean, we talked obviously when Rita Ora went to X Factor. Was that a blow? Is there a problem in terms of talent and getting that judging pool right? Or do you think you've got it right now? It's great.
I think the next line, I'm really excited about it. I think our audience will really enjoy the new dynamics that new people on that lineup brings.
Mm-hmm. And it runs out in a year's time.
Yeah, we've got one more series of The Voice. Yeah.
What will happen then?
Well, at the moment, our current contract is this. We're contracts up to the next series. That's very much my focus. I'm really excited about it. Again, I wouldn't discuss contractual negotiations, but suffice to say, I love The Voice, and I think our audience absolutely love it. With 8.5 million people tuning in to The Voice on Saturday nights, what's not to love?
Can we talk a bit about that Saturday night issue though? Because obviously you've got The Voice. Strictly comes back in a month, a few weeks' time.
Yes, which I can announce another. Do you want another? Do you want another? We've got another Strictly announcement to wait, which I must make sure I get in there. So I can't remember how many numbers we're up to now in our lineup, but the next celebrity is going to be Helen George from Call the Midwife. Oh, she's fantastic. Very pleased that she's going to do it.
I mean, that's obviously been an enormous success, but what happens, when that's not on air? How are you going to fill this Saturday night entertainment?
We've got 2 new shows that we've announced recently that are coming up, which I'm excited about. There's The Getaway Car with Dermot O'Leary and The Stig, which is, a really adrenalised, really fun game show. Then we've got Can't Touch This with Ashley Banjo and Zoe Ball. Again, a really fun game show. So great to see those play out. I think everybody knows, it's one of the hardest things to land Saturday night. I'm really proud of the shows and what we've tried to do. But as I say, not everything always works, but I'm in the risk with the people that make the shows, and we will go on to produce the next shows.
What went wrong with Prized Apart? Because this time last year you were really keen on it. I thought it was a great idea.
Yeah, I think Carl Warner, Meredith, and myself, and Rachel Ashdown, the team, I think, again, I think it was beautifully produced. I think it was hugely ambitious. I mean, God, it was terrifying when we'd watched the footage coming back of what they've been doing that week, hanging over gorges. It was really exciting. I think we all learnt a lot from it. I think the attempt to do a studio game show with an adrenalised sort of adventure on location, in the end, I think we all had to go, it made storytelling really hard. It was complex. We had to go between 2 locations. I don't think it wasn't as talked about as a big piece. It didn't feel like in the end that it did bring a massive audience to it that I'd have wanted it to, or that it would have felt like it was talked about enough. But I'm really proud of it, and I think we all, I'd certainly work with them again. I think, it was a great show.
There's been a couple of things that have just had one series and then gone. Obviously, there's that. Boomers, I think, hasn't come back yet.
Boomers has come back.
It is going to come back, but there's been a sort of couple of things. Are you making sort of, it comes on, it doesn't work, it goes?
No, well, not everything returns. I think sometimes you feel you've learnt from it and you know where you can see how to bring it back even better the next time. I think you're always watching to see whether something's growing. And as I say, it's not all about numbers. Actually, it's about whether you think it's made an impact, and the audience have really begun to, again, that sort of talked about thing that I think BBC One is so good at, and it's part of what makes BBC One is those big event must-see moments.
Do you think it's important this year, particularly with Charles Renewal, that sort of Saturday night talked about moments?
Well, I think creating television that the nation can come together and that it's created by television in the way that Strictly does. I think in the way that Bake Off does. I think it's of course it's one of the things that I think is vital to for our audience and for BBC One. So of course it's important, but getting it right, you've got to keep trying.
Before we leave Brides off, you never thought at any point flying them off to Morocco. That wasn't going to work.
Think who?
The prized offing, flying them. One of the biggest criticism was the sort of environmental impact.
Well, we flew them back on EasyJet, I think it was.
Well, it's more using the flight there, wasn't it? I don't mean the cost, the environmental, you know, flying them backwards and forwards when they, to the studio to sort of, was that ever sort of...
Yeah, we did talk about that and we made sure that, you know, yeah, absolutely we talked about that and we made sure that we limited it as much as possible. But it was inherent to the format that, you know, the partners were in the studio waiting to see who was going to come through and then one of them had to get back on.
Okay. So, but nothing sort of similar to that in the pipeline, you don't think that's sort of...
not that we're talking about right now, but again, I think there are elements of that show which absolutely work.
On Strictly, in the Leaders' Debate, Peter Fincham said he was going to release all the dates for X Factor. Is that to avoid clashes? Is that going to affect your scheduling?
If he would like to move X Factor later, that'd be fantastic. You know, I think I have to think. Well, I have to think about what's right for our audience. That has to be my focus. I think for licence fee payers, you know, these are the shows they love. These are the shows they really love the BBC for. Of course, that's my priority, to think about where am I going to put those shows in the best place for the audience. I mean, I could say to Peter Fincham, I think Danny probably said this to him as well, it's like, you know, Emmerdale quite often goes up against EastEnders. That's soap against soap. You know, I would say that's not great for the audience. But, you know, we have to, you know, we do our very best to avoid clashes. You know, I think for the England football game, I think it makes sense where we're starting. It's the same length as the Strictly launch was last time. It's an extremely important moment for our audience, the Strictly launch, and that has to be my focus.
OK. Now, you mentioned EastEnders. Obviously, this was a massive year for drama. I wanted to get to it, obviously, before the end. We've got a clip. It was the 30th anniversary for EastEnders. And I have to say, this was a clip that you chose for What Was I Thinking, which I think is a bit cheeky, using the most popular soap and its 30th anniversary, rather than Save Prized Apart. But maybe you can explain. We'll watch the clip, and then you can explain why you are justifying it as What Was I Thinking.
Did you say something to her that stopped her reporting?
No.
Look at me. Look at me! You're lying.
I am not.
You put up with everything Lucy threw at you and worse. So what was it Lucy said to you that was so bad you had to kill her?
I'm not going to go through every little detail, Ian.
Jane, I don't believe you.
It was me, Ian.
There was someone else here, wasn't there?
You were grasping at straws.
He called his mum, didn't he? He did something bad. And he phoned you for help.
So why did you pick that?
I think when Dominic Treble-Collins and Ben Stevenson came to me and said, look, what are we going to do for the 30th anniversary? We've thought, let's do a whole week of live. You know, at the time, I thought, yeah, brilliant, let's do it, let's go for it. That's a great idea. No one ever has done that before. That's hugely ambitious, exactly what we should be doing. And off we went to, you know, conjure up the multiple storylines that I think was the most extraordinary thing about that week, everything coming together. It was brilliantly woven with, you know, a baby being born live in the Vic, to Doc being taken off to prison, to, you know, obviously the Lucy Beale story being revealed. You know, I have to say the week before, when I turned up at Elstree to see the rehearsals and I saw the commitment and the hard work and the complexity of what we were trying to achieve with cameras, you know, that were placed at the bottom of the car to get that fantastic shot of Dot Cotton with, you know, going in and out of VT. And I mean, honestly, I thought, what was I thinking? Why this is such an important it's such an important part of the schedule. It's such an important part of BBC One, and I thought, what, you know, are we really? Is this really going to be all right? Suddenly it felt like the pressure of, you know, that we could have been over, you know, pushed ourselves was very scary. But of course, at the same, yeah, I mean, you know,
21 million people.
It was 21 million people. It was extraordinary. I think that last episode where, you know, it was played out as theatre. You know, you forget the EastEnders cast. They, you know, they didn't just stop making EastEnders while they could take some time off to rehearse for live shows. You know, these guys were continuing to make EastEnders that comes back week after week after week. And at the same time, they were all so dedicated and so up for the challenge. Honestly, the buzz on set was absolutely amazing. And that's testimony to what I think is one of the most extraordinary teams in the business. week in, week out. You know, they challenge themselves. You know, I think Dominic's done a fantastic job with the.
So we should expect a live EastEnders Christmas special.
Well, I think, you know, expect some fantastic stories. You know, it's going to be another roller coaster for the next year. Just
talking about great stories. Obviously, one piece of talent that's done wonders for BBC One and led to those amazing figures in Q1 was Poldark.
You can put my picture on, okay?
No, that was just for the beginning. 8.1 million. Are you slightly worried though that the sort of your drama will be seen as a retro drama?
Gosh, I mean, you know, again, I think, you know, it's unparalleled, the range of drama that we do on BBC One. You know, yes, Poldark was a fantastic phenomenon. It's part of what we do. I'm incredibly proud of it. But if I think about The Missing, Happy Valley, The Syndicate, Ordinary Lies, which is coming back. Today we're announcing Russell T Davies is doing Midsummer Night's Dream for us. Tony Jordan is doing a fantastical musical drama called Stop in the Name of Love. I won't start singing. Tony always does, but we all go a bit quiet in the room. We're also doing... we've got Steve McQueen doing a 6-part series for us about the Mangrove Club, which will give a perspective and a voice, which simply is a story that hasn't been told before. You know, again, it's the range that we do on BBC One, and I think drama's on fire at the moment. I think about what's coming up in the autumn. I'm going to forget we've got Abby Morgan's River, we've got Pete Bowker's Capital, fantastic piece. We've got, and then there were none at Christmas. We've got Dickensian. There's Lady Chatterley, there's Inspector Calls, there's Night Manager, which is the Le Carré.
We've got 5 more series of Poldark, is that right?
We are commissioned for the next series of Poldark.
Just one?
Just one, that is at the moment.
That's just one. And when's that on?
We'll focus on that. That'll be on next year.
Not a moment too soon, frankly. So you mentioned the Dickensians. I think we've got a clip from that as well. I've answered a couple of questions, but do keep them coming in on the app, everybody. If we can see Dickensian, this was 20-episode drama written by Tony Jordan, that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that looks amazing. Production values are great. There has been some criticism, though, that it's a bit of a rip-off of ABC's Once Upon a Time. What do you say to that?
I don't think that's... I haven't watched ABC's Once Upon a Time, but this comes from absolutely both the mind of Charles Dickens and the mind of Tony Jordan. And when you visit the set, and I went down the other day with Danny, it's like going through the corridors of Charles Dickens's mind. It's absolutely extraordinary. And what Tony's done, which I think is absolutely, you know, innovative in every way, is he's taken all the true characters, all the characters that we love from Dickens, and he tells every bit of the story is somewhere in a Dickens novel. So it's all that, you know, whether it's Miss Havisham, but it's taken from the paragraph about her past and it's played out, and they all weave together beautifully. I think it's you know, it's 20 parts. Again, I think only the BBC would commit to this 20-part series, Dickensian now. And it's hugely ambitious, but I think a superb piece of work.
And when do we know when it's going to go on yet?
I'm not going to give away the schedule now because the scheduling team are sitting in the front row and they will be so cross with me.
Why does it? It's really interesting, sort of the Sunday night historical drama on the BBC sort of phenomenon. Why does that work so well?
Well, I think Sunday nights is when our audiences want to sit down and, you know, and sit back and enjoy the best drama in the business. But that's not to say, you know, we have fantastic drama on Tuesday nights. I think there's when we look at pieces coming in and we do get a feel for what we think works on a Sunday and what we think works midweek. You know, I think Happy Valley, which plays out on Tuesdays, was, you know, an extraordinary piece, just like The Missing. I mean, I think, you know, where you play it is a whole factor of things.
I mean, there's obviously they're talking about some of the other shows. The Need in Line, for example, was one of the shows that the sort of same sort of vintage as Poldark. Are you now sort of looking back on those great hit programmes and wondering what could come back?
No, look, I think, you know, the great British literary classics and the Poldark, which is in the minds of, you know, I do remember it. I'm old enough, I shouldn't really admit that, should I? But I do remember it as a kid, and I'm a massive Cornwall fan. So, you know, I love that part of it. But I don't, you know, of course not. I think, again, it's the range of what we do. We do a lot of fantastic literary adaptations. We do a lot of very modern, edgy, classic, you know, contemporary pieces. So, again, it's the mix. That's the great thing that you get on BBC One. It's quite weird, isn't it, reading everything as it comes
up? Yeah.
Remind everyone of the networking drinks.
Is that a warning that there's only 5 minutes to go? Yeah. OK, sorry. Yeah. Finally, I sort of want to talk about that. You know, we've talked about the sort of the great successes, the not such successful shows. Over the next year, innovation, if you know, this sort of idea of distinctiveness in Whittingdale's words, innovation, you talked about being innovative and mainstream. What show do you think will define the next year?
What that's coming up that you haven't seen?
Well, actually, just either what you've already got or...
Do you know, I think in terms of, I mean, I'd probably do it in each genre in some ways, but I mean, for drama, I think for me, The Missing and Happy Valley really showed that our audience, you know, they love complexity, they love to be stretched. I think, you know, no one would have necessarily known there's going to be the big hits. I think that's so often the way with hits. It's not like you sit with every show that you commission, you've got massive hopes for it. You try and give all your creative energy to it, and we all want it to do its best. But you never know what's going to turn the hit. So it's always it's very easy in retrospect to kind of make it feel like it was obvious, but it's not that. It's not obvious, you know. But I think in terms of drama, I think both The Missing and Happy Valley, I think were extraordinary.
And is sort of moving from being obviously head of docs to channel controller, is it the talent issue that's been the hardest to come to terms with, or the political pressure, or what's been the hardest?
No, I've really enjoyed it, and I really, really mean that. I think it's a huge privilege to be in this job, and I love working with all the people that I work with. I think probably the biggest challenge is that you're dealing with so many different things at the same time, and you've got to keep your eye on, and you're trying to work out where to focus and not, you know, drop any of the balls. But I think that's probably something that, you know, even when I was running docs, I was, you know, working across 4 channels, and I think that's probably, you know, something that, you know, I can do. I quite like that juggle. I think that probably suits the way I think about it. But no, I think, yeah, I think it's probably the range, keeping tabs on the range and making sure that you're there for everyone actually when they need you and they want your input. You know, because I think so often people feel that channel controllers just sit there and these diktats come down. And as much as possible, I make a real, you know, I really think, and I think I know this because from both a programme maker and an indie and then as a commissioner, I know that dialogue and that moment to actually have the conversation, you know, is so much better when you go back into that cutting room and you know what you're doing and you know what we're all heading towards. So I think trying to make sure that you see as many people as possible to kind of make sure that things aren't getting lost in translation. You know, that I think is quite a challenge.
Have you had sort of sleepless nights over the lost in translation bit though? What's been the thing that's made you...
Do you know, honestly, I don't know. I'm not somebody who has sleepless nights. You know, clearly there are things that, you know, you worry about that are on your mind. You have, you know, when you put your energy into something and you go with a programme and you've got all these high hopes for it, you want it to do what you set out to do, and you want that for the people who've put all their energy into making that piece. You know, I genuinely feel, and again, I would hope that everyone feels this when I work with them, that we are all hoping and, you know, we're all crossing our fingers together.
So give me a last thing then, what's the one that you're really disappointed didn't work, that you're really excited about, you commissioned and it just didn't work? What's the one thing that you're really disappointed? Well, I think, you know, I mean, you know, so it's interesting when you said to me earlier, you said, you know, that was a bit of a, when you said, what was I thinking? You know, I would never sit here and choose one that would, you know, feel that I would sort of stand out, go, what was I thinking? You know, obviously, I think Prize to Part, we really wanted it to work. So, yeah, I think, you know, I would have really hoped for all the effort and the time and the creativity and the great production values that went into it. Yeah, I really wanted that to work. And that was sort of the disappointment. So what was the biggest success? Go on, we'll end on an upbeat note.
Gosh, again, I think there's so many successes across. I was really pleased with the Met. I was really pleased with Baby P. No, but, you know, there's so many things that I think, you know, for me, that Baby P working and having that impact, it was 3 years in the making. And Henry Singer, you know, we've got Ollie Lambert's doing a film, Abused. We've got a film about Mark Duggan coming that Jamie DeCruz is. And I have to say that when I know that the talent behind the cameras, and it's, you know, these small teams of dedicated people, and I know how much they put into it, it's so great when you know that it, you know, it gets rewarded. And that personally, I think, is when I feel, you know, that big feeling of...
There hasn't been a picture of you in the bikini in pages of the Daily Mail yet, so... Let's hope the next year.
Yeah, just on a horse with Pond.
On that note, I do need to remind you all, very importantly, the networking drinks are upstairs in the BT TV lounge.
Very good.
Charlotte and her team will be there. Welcome any questions that I haven't asked. Thank you very much to Charlotte, most importantly. And also their sponsors, Broadcast Magazine.